Emily Carter, a skilled mechanic with a knack for uncovering forgotten treasures, never imagined the discovery she was about to make. When an old map led her to a hidden presidential bunker buried deep beneath a mountain, she stumbled upon a fleet of high-tech security vehicles worth millions. But what she uncovered next could change her life forever and put her in the crosshairs of those desperate to keep the secret hidden. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if stories like this excite you, make sure to hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow's episode will uncover an even bigger mystery. Let's get started. Emily Carter's grease-stained hands slid across the old wooden box as she carefully pulled it down from the top shelf in her father's garage. The place had always been a mess of old engines, dusty parts, and forgotten projects, but today something caught her eye. Hidden beneath a pile of faded car manuals and old tool kits was a worn leather case. She had never seen it before, and curiosity got the better of her. Gently she opened it, revealing a map, not just any map, but one that seemed out of place for the small town she had spent her whole life in. It was frayed at the edges, covered in markings and annotations that looked as if they had been made decades ago. Where the hell did this come from? Emily muttered, tracing the lines of the map with her finger. It depicted a mountain range she knew well, the one just north of town. But what stood out was the symbol stamped at the center of the map. A crest with a bald eagle, the unmistakable insignia of a presidential seal. She stared at it for a long time, her mind racing. Could it be? Was this a map to something government-related? Maybe some kind of underground facility? Emily's heart skipped a beat. She had always been the curious type, the one who loved to tinker with old engines, uncover forgotten treasures, and bring them back to life. But this was different. This wasn't just an abandoned car or old farm equipment, this was something much bigger. Her mind raced with possibilities. If this map was real, it could lead her to something historic. A presidential bunker? A secret military base? The thrill of the hunt surged through her. This could be the discovery of a lifetime. Without a second thought, Emily grabbed her jacket and threw the map into her bag. It was time to see where this mystery would take her. She had no idea what she'd find when she reached the marked location. But one thing was certain. It wasn't going to be an ordinary day. The sun was setting by the time Emily's truck rattled down the winding dirt road that led into the hills. The map, now crinkled and creased in her hands, had guided her to this remote location, deep in the wilderness. Her headlights flickered over the dense trees, and the only sounds were the crunch of gravel under her tires and the occasional rustling of leaves in the wind. She'd passed the last sign of civilization an hour ago. Now, she was on her own, following the map's cryptic markings. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, the kind of smell that made her feel small and insignificant, but also filled with a sense of adventure. She had no idea what lay ahead, but a part of her felt that this was her moment, her chance to uncover something that had been hidden for years. As she rounded a bend in the road, the terrain began to change. The trees thinned out, and a rocky outcrop loomed in front of her. According to the map, this was the spot. Emily stopped the truck, her heart pounding. She stepped out into the cool night air and grabbed her flashlight from the glove compartment. The beam cut through the darkness, scanning the area ahead. There, at the base of the outcrop, she saw something, a barely visible entrance, partially concealed by overgrown vines and brush. Her pulse quickened. Could this be it? The entrance to the presidential bunker? She moved forward, pushing the vegetation aside. The entrance was a heavy steel door, half buried in the dirt, with an old combination lock still intact. Emily knelt in front of it, her fingers tracing the cold metal. Her breath fogged in the air as she considered her next move. Was this a trap? A dead end? Or was she on the verge of a discovery so big it could change everything? She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling as she dialed the number of a trusted old friend, Jake, a local locksmith who'd helped her out of a few tight spots before. As the phone rang, she felt a chill race down her spine. Whatever was behind this door, it was more than just a relic from the past. It was a secret that someone, or something had gone to great lengths to hide. The phone clicked, and Jake's voice answered. "What's up, Em?" "Jake, I need your help," Emily said, her voice steady despite the excitement bubbling up inside her. "I've found something, and it's big." The air grew thicker as Emily made her way to the bunker entrance, her flashlight beam flickering over the rusted metal door. She felt a strange mixture of excitement and apprehension coil in her stomach. Every instinct told her to proceed with caution, but the curiosity that had always driven her, the same curiosity that had led her to fix broken engines and restore forgotten machines, pushed her forward. With a deep breath, she knelt down to examine the old combination lock. The metal was cold and covered in a thin layer of dirt and rust. She ran her fingers over the numbers, which were barely legible in the dim light. There was a challenge to this, something that made her pulse quicken. She wasn't just unlocking a door, she was uncovering a secret, one that had been hidden for decades. Emily stood up and pulled out her phone. Jake's voice crackled through the speaker as she quickly explained the situation. "You sure about this, Em?" he asked, his tone skeptical. "I have to know what's behind it," she replied, her voice steady despite the nerves that were beginning to creep in. Jake sighed on the other end. "All right, send me a picture of that lock, I'll get you the code. But don't do anything crazy, all right? We don't know what you're dealing with." She nodded, even though he couldn't see her. As she snapped a photo of the lock, her mind raced. What if she wasn't supposed to be here? What if this was someone else's secret, one they were willing to do anything to protect? Before long, her phone buzzed with a message from Jake. The code. Emily entered it, and with a soft click, the lock released. Her heart skipped a beat as she slowly pushed open the door. The musty air that greeted her was thick with the scent of dust, mildew, and years of neglect. She stepped inside, her flashlight illuminating a narrow corridor that led down into the depths of the mountain. The walls were lined with metal and concrete, built to withstand time and the elements. The silence was almost deafening, save for the distant hum of some ancient system still running somewhere deep within the bunker. Emily walked cautiously, each step echoing in the hollow corridor. The walls seemed to close in on her as she descended further into the darkness, and the weight of what she was doing began to press down on her shoulders. She was not just exploring an abandoned bunker, she was stepping into a place that held secrets, some of which could be worth millions, others that might be dangerous to uncover. She turned a corner, and there it was, the first glimpse of what she had been searching for. Rows upon rows of vehicles, covered in layers of dust, sat in the large underground garage. But they weren't just any vehicles. These were state-of-the-art security machines, their sleek, futuristic designs unlike anything she had ever seen. She walked forward, her breath catching in her throat as she took in the sight of them. Each vehicle was meticulously covered, as if someone had taken great care to preserve them for a time when they might be needed again. The faint outlines of military insignias peeked through the dust on the sides, confirming her worst fears and greatest hopes. These weren't just vehicles. They were part of something much larger, a government fleet, one designed for the highest levels of security. Her heart pounded in her chest. She had just found the kind of treasure that people would kill to get their hands on. But what else was hidden in this bunker? Emily couldn't shake the feeling that she had just uncovered something that wasn't meant to be found. The dim light from Emily's flashlight danced across the surface of the vehicles, revealing sleek, armored exteriors and high-tech weaponry systems that seemed out of place for something so old. The silence in the bunker was oppressive, broken only by the soft echo of her boots against the concrete floor. She couldn't help but feel like she was intruding on something that had been preserved for a reason. Her fingers brushed against the cold metal of one of the vehicles, and she froze, a chill running up her spine. It wasn't just the design of the machines that captivated her, but the history they represented. The more she looked, the more she realized these vehicles weren't just relics of a bygone era. They were something else, something that belonged to a time of secrecy, fear, and power. She squatted down, peering beneath the tarps and dust that covered one of the machines. The insignia of the United States Secret Service stood out against the faded camouflage pattern. It looked like a futuristic security vehicle, designed for a purpose far beyond simple transportation. Her hand instinctively reached for the vehicle's door, her mind racing with possibilities. The excitement in her chest gave way to a gnawing unease. These weren't just any cars. They were built for a different world, a world that had been locked away for decades. As she slid the door open with a creak, the interior was revealed. Dark leather seats, panels with buttons and screens she couldn't even begin to understand, and compartments that seemed far too advanced for the time period they were supposed to be from. It was as if the future had been stored in this bunker and left to age. The feeling that she was holding a piece of history, a glimpse into something beyond the ordinary, consumed her. She stepped back and surveyed the garage again. This wasn't just an abandoned facility or an old government base. No, this was something more significant. It was as if it had been designed to withstand not just time, but an entire era. The machines were almost frozen in time, and Emily had no idea what to make of them. Her flashlight caught something on the far wall, a plaque, partially hidden behind a stack of old crates. She moved closer, brushing off the dust to reveal a name. Presidential Fleet Project, Sentinels. The words sent a shiver down her spine. Project Sentinels? It didn't take long for her to realize what that meant. These weren't just vehicles designed for security. They were a part of something much larger, a government initiative, possibly linked to the most sensitive national security operations. Whatever Project Sentinels was, it was something that had been kept hidden for a reason. And as Emily stood in that cold, forgotten bunker, she knew that she had stumbled upon something much bigger than she had imagined. These vehicles weren't just worth millions, they were priceless. Suddenly, the weight of what she had discovered pressed down on her like a physical force. This wasn't just a treasure hunt anymore. She wasn't simply a mechanic stumbling upon forgotten machines. She was standing in the middle of a secret that someone, somewhere, would do anything to keep buried. Her hand tightened around the flashlight as a new realization hit her. If this project was as classified as it seemed, there was more at stake here than just money. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she surveyed the garage, taking in the full scope of what lay before her. The vehicles, each one more advanced than anything she had ever seen, were lined up in perfect formation. The sleek, aerodynamic shapes glistened under the dim light, their dark paint still unmarred by time. These machines weren't just military grade. They were masterpieces, designed with an attention to detail that spoke to their importance. She stepped closer to one of the vehicles, her hand hovering over its surface. A low hum vibrated in the air, as if the machine was alive, waiting for someone to wake it from its slumber. Emily knew enough about engines to recognize that these weren't just ordinary cars. They were purpose-built for a very specific kind of mission. Her fingers traced the outline of the vehicle's armor, thick and reinforced. These weren't just security vehicles. They were fortresses on wheels. Her mind raced. Who had created these? Why had they been left to rot in this forgotten bunker? The more she thought about it, the more the answers seemed to slip further out of reach. And yet, there was something irresistible about the fleet. It felt like a puzzle that was just waiting to be solved. She moved to the next vehicle, crouching down to get a better look at its interior. As she opened the door, a sense of awe swept over her. The seats, plush and ergonomic, were designed for comfort in the most hostile environments. The dashboard was a series of screens, buttons, and holographic displays, all connected by sleek, unbroken lines. Every part of the vehicle was tailored for survival, for missions that required the utmost precision and secrecy. Emily reached for the controls, her fingers brushing against the intricate interface. There was a strange, almost magnetic pull to the machines. She had worked on some of the most high-end cars in the world, but this was on another level. She felt a rush of excitement, mixed with a deep sense of responsibility. These vehicles had been designed for a purpose that was far beyond her understanding. As she stepped back from the vehicle, Emily couldn't help but feel like she was in the middle of something much larger than herself. The implications of what she had found were beginning to settle into her mind, and they were both thrilling and terrifying. She turned back to the far wall, where the faint outlines of other vehicles were hidden beneath layers of tarps and dust. These machines weren't just security tools. They were part of a legacy, part of a plan. She had uncovered a fleet that had been preserved for a reason, and the more she thought about it, the more she realized someone would be looking for these. With the discovery of the fleet, Emily had unwittingly stepped into a game far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. But the thought of the secrets locked away in these machines, the history buried beneath layers of dirt, kept her rooted to the spot. Her fingers curled around the edge of the tarp, ready to uncover more. She had to know the truth, but as she pulled the cover off one of the other vehicles, she heard something, a faint noise, like footsteps. Someone else was here. The sound of footsteps grew louder, echoing through the cavernous space of the bunker. Emily's heart skipped a beat. She froze, her body tense, the flashlight trembling in her hand as she slowly lowered it. The silence that followed was thick, pregnant with the weight of uncertainty. She didn't dare move, afraid that even the slightest sound would give her away. She pressed herself against the wall, her breath shallow. Was it someone from the government? A secret agent? Whoever they were coming for the same thing. Emily had just found the fleet of military vehicles. She had to make a decision, and fast. She could try to run, but that would mean leaving behind the discovery of a lifetime. And if the people who own these vehicles found her snooping around, well, she didn't like to think about what would happen then. The footsteps stopped just outside the garage, followed by the sharp sound of a door opening. Emily's mind raced. She hadn't seen anyone else in the bunker, but if they were in the vicinity, they would likely be drawn to the garage. The thought of being caught made her pulse quicken. Her mind raced for a solution. There was no way she could confront whoever was out there. She wasn't armed, and she certainly wasn't prepared for a fight. Her best option was to hide and wait, to see what they wanted and hope that, for once, luck would be on her side. Her eyes darted around the room. There were a few narrow hallways leading to storage rooms in the back of the bunker. She could make a break for one of them, but the chances of getting away without being seen were slim. No, she had to stay hidden. Her gaze landed on a large stack of crates in the corner. It was her only chance. She sprinted, ducking low behind the crates, her heart thudding in her chest. As she crouched down, the sound of footsteps moved closer, then paused. Emily held her breath, her mind racing with every possible outcome. She wished she had known more about this place, its history, who ran it, why the vehicles had been stored here. The deeper she got into this, the more questions piled up. What was Project Sentinels? What kind of operations had these vehicles been used for? And why had they been abandoned? The silence stretched on, only interrupted by the distant hum of some machine still working within the bunker. Then, just as Emily was starting to think the danger had passed, a voice rang out, sharp and commanding. "You're not supposed to be here." Emily's blood ran cold. She couldn't see the figure yet, but the voice was unmistakable, authoritative, filled with an intensity that made her stomach drop. Her mind raced. This was it. Whoever had found her wasn't just a curious wanderer. They were part of something much bigger, something dangerous. Before she could react, the sound of a door slamming shut echoed through the bunker, followed by footsteps retreating in the opposite direction. Emily's chest heaved as she cautiously stood, her body still stiff from hiding. The adrenaline coursing through her veins was almost unbearable. The voice had left her with more questions than answers. Had she stumbled into a government operation, or had something far more sinister been happening here? Whatever it was, she wasn't going to get answers by standing around. She needed to make her next move, and fast. As Emily cautiously approached the vehicles again, a new sense of urgency filled the air. The secret she had uncovered was much more dangerous than she had imagined. Emily's hands shook as she pressed herself against the wall, her mind racing. The voice she had heard, cold and commanding, was still echoing in her thoughts. Whoever had been in the bunker with her wasn't just a passerby. They were part of something larger. The secrecy, the power, the military-grade technology hidden beneath a mountain, it all pointed to a web of influence far beyond her comprehension. She couldn't let them catch her. There was too much at stake now, too much she didn't understand, and she wasn't ready to face whoever was lurking in the shadows of this place. But as her adrenaline rush began to subside, another realization crept in: she couldn't just leave. Not yet. She had uncovered something monumental, something that could change everything, and walking away would mean abandoning the truth. Emily took a deep breath, steadying herself as her eyes scanned the room once more. The vehicles sat like dormant giants, still covered in dust but now gleaming with the weight of their significance. She had to know more. She had to understand what Project Sentinels really was, and why these vehicles had been left to rot in this forgotten bunker. The implications of her discovery were growing by the second, and she couldn't walk away without uncovering more. But the danger was real. Whoever owned these vehicles wasn't going to let her leave unscathed. She had already seen the signs, the secretive nature of the bunker, the urgency of the guards, and now the shadowy figure she'd overheard. This was a game of power, of control, and she was a player whether she liked it or not. The room felt suddenly smaller, the walls closing in around her as she considered her options. She could try to slip away undetected, but the knowledge she'd gained was too dangerous to simply forget. This was bigger than her now. It wasn't just about uncovering a forgotten fleet. It was about exposing something that had been hidden for decades, something that could threaten everything she knew. As she turned to look at the vehicles one last time, her eyes caught on a piece of equipment she hadn't noticed before: a large armored truck near the back of the room. It looked different from the rest of the fleet. Heavier, more industrial. The metal was marked with more recent wear and tear, as though it had been used in more recent operations. There was no insignia on it, just a series of numbers painted on the side. Without thinking, Emily walked toward the truck. As she approached, she saw a small keypad embedded in the door frame. She hesitated for a moment, the weight of what she was about to do settling over her. This wasn't just a truck. This was part of something. This vehicle held secrets, but unlocking it, gaining access to whatever was inside, could be a step too far. She could feel her pulse quicken as she stared at the keypad, wondering whether it was time to push forward, to unlock the next layer of mystery, or was it time to retreat? Emily's instincts told her one thing: power, once uncovered, never stays buried for long. Her fingers hovered over the keypad. She had no choice. She had come this far. Now, she needed answers. The sound of her fingers tapping against the keypad echoed in the silence of the bunker. Emily's heart raced, her mind flickering between excitement and fear. The truck, this seemingly ordinary vehicle, felt like the final puzzle piece. She had to unlock the piece that would reveal the true power behind Project Sentinels. But as her fingers danced over the keys, she couldn't shake the feeling that the stakes had just escalated. She pressed a series of numbers, the ones that seemed to fit the pattern of the other vehicles in the fleet. The machine beeped, once a soft, indifferent sound. She held her breath. Another press. Another beep. This time, the door to the truck creaked open, and a wave of stale air rushed out, filling her lungs. It was like opening a tomb. Inside, the vehicle was immaculate. The dashboard gleamed under the dim light, and the interior looked more like something from a science fiction film than a military asset. Tactical screens, weapons lockers, communication panels, all set up in a configuration she had never seen before. Every inch of the vehicle was designed for precision, speed, and secrecy. Emily swallowed hard. This wasn't just a security vehicle. This was something that had been built for a purpose far beyond anything she could have imagined. Her flashlight cut through the gloom, illuminating the contents of the truck. But it wasn't the truck itself that caught her attention. It was the files, neatly arranged in a compartment beneath the seats. She opened the drawer slowly, her hands trembling, and pulled them out. The files were thick, stamped with red lettering that read, "Top Secret." She scanned through the first few pages. Names, dates, and coordinates, each more encrypted than the last. It wasn't long before she realized what these files were. They were blueprints. But not for the vehicles. No, these were blueprints for operations, missions that had been carried out, operations that spanned across countries, across decades. These weren't just vehicles built for security. They were part of a network, a clandestine program designed to protect some of the world's most powerful people. Her mind spun. The truth was beginning to unravel, and with it came a terrible realization. This wasn't just about old government secrets. This was about something much larger. Someone was hiding these vehicles for a reason, and if they knew she had found them, well, it was no longer just her curiosity at risk. It was her life. A sudden noise made Emily freeze. Footsteps again, but this time they were closer. Too close. Panic surged through her as she shoved the files back into the compartment, her fingers fumbling in her haste. She had no time to waste. She slammed the door shut and crouched behind the vehicle, her breath shallow, her body rigid with fear. She had to get out of here, but the bunker felt like it was closing in on her. With each passing second, she could feel the walls closing in. The footsteps grew louder. She needed to move. With a burst of adrenaline, Emily bolted, heading toward the narrow corridor that led back to the exit. Her mind raced with the weight of what she had just uncovered. There was no turning back now. Whatever this was, whatever she had discovered, someone was going to come for her. She didn't know who, but they would stop at nothing to keep the secrets buried. She had to get out. She had to warn someone. Before it was too late. Emily's heart hammered in her chest as she raced through the winding corridors of the bunker, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She knew she couldn't stay here much longer. The footsteps behind her had become louder, more insistent. Whoever had followed her into the bunker was getting closer, and the walls felt like they were closing in. She glanced over her shoulder, no sign of them yet, but she could feel their presence, like a shadow trailing her every move. Her mind was a storm of questions. What had she stumbled upon? Who were these people who would go to such lengths to hide a fleet of military vehicles, along with classified operations that spanned across decades? And why had they been left here, in a forgotten mountain bunker? The answers she had uncovered so far only led to more questions, each more dangerous than the last. She rounded a corner, her hand brushing the cold concrete wall, and there it was, the exit. The heavy steel door loomed before her, her last chance at escaping the nightmare she had walked into. She reached for the door handle, but then she stopped. The weight of the decision hit her like a ton of bricks. She could leave. She could walk away and pretend this never happened, return to her normal life as a mechanic in a small town. But deep down, she knew that wasn't who she was. She had spent her life uncovering forgotten machines, putting together pieces of broken things. This wasn't just a car or an engine. This was history, a secret history, and it was hers to uncover. The fear gnawing at her began to blend with something else, something like resolve. If she left now, the truth would be buried forever. But if she stayed, if she pushed forward, she risked everything. Her job, her safety, maybe even her life. But there was one thing she knew for sure. This secret wasn't hers to keep. It belonged to the world. And the world needed to know what was hidden here, behind this mountain. Emily hesitated, torn between the desire to run and the need to expose what she had uncovered. Her fingers gripped the door handle tighter. She could hear the distant sounds of movement, the unmistakable shuffle of boots coming her way. Time was running out. Her decision was made. With a final breath, she shoved open the heavy door, the creak of metal echoing through the bunker. She bolted out into the fading light, the cool air hitting her like a shock to the system. The outside world felt like freedom, but she knew it was only temporary. She wasn't safe. Not yet. She had to get to the authorities, to someone who could help her make sense of what she had uncovered. She had to get to someone who could protect her, but she couldn't do it alone. As she ran, her mind turned to one last thought, the files she had found in that truck. If she could get them into the right hands, if she could expose the truth, then maybe, just maybe, she could bring down the people who had worked so hard to bury it all. The mission had just begun, and it wasn't going to be easy. But Emily had never backed down from a challenge before. This time would be no different. Emily's legs burned as she sprinted across the rocky ground, the bunker now a distant shadow behind her. Her mind was racing, the adrenaline keeping her on high alert, but her thoughts were scattered. There was no time to process what had just happened, not yet. The vehicles, the classified files, the military operations that stretched across the globe, all of it was out there now, and she couldn't go back to the life she had known before. As she reached the tree line, Emily slowed to a jog, her breath coming in sharp gasps. She glanced back over her shoulder, half expecting someone to be chasing her. The silence of the wilderness surrounding her felt eerie in contrast to the chaos she had just escaped. No one had followed her out. Not yet, at least. She paused, trying to steady her breathing. The weight of her decision hung heavy on her chest. She hadn't been able to outrun the truth. No matter how hard she tried to escape, it would always catch up to her. The question was no longer about survival. It was about the consequences of what she had uncovered. If the people behind Project Sentinels realized she was still alive, they wouldn't hesitate to eliminate the threat she posed. She had seen enough to know that. A sudden thought struck her. What if she didn't go to the authorities? What if she didn't tell anyone about the fleet? What if she just walked away, let the government clean up its own mess, and return to the quiet life she had lived before? She could find a way to bury the secret, move on, and pretend it never happened. But the more she thought about it, the less appealing that option seemed. She couldn't forget what she had seen. She couldn't forget the truth that was now inside her head, gnawing at her, demanding to be shared. She had to expose it, for her own peace of mind, if nothing else. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of resolve igniting inside her. She knew what she had to do. The information she had was too dangerous to keep to herself. If she wanted to protect herself, she would have to fight back, and fighting back meant getting help. She couldn't do it alone. She pulled out her phone, hands shaking as she dialed a number she hadn't called in years. The line clicked once, twice, and then the voice on the other end of the line answered, as familiar as it was unexpected. "Emily? Is everything okay?" Jake's voice was cautious, concerned. She could hear the sleep in his tone, but she didn't have time for pleasantries. "I need your help," she said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. "It's big, bigger than anything you can imagine, and I need to get it into the right hands." Jake was silent for a moment. "What happened? I'll explain later. But I need you to get me in touch with someone who can protect me, and get me those files back. The ones I left behind." The silence stretched between them, but Emily knew he would understand. Jake had always known she had a way of getting herself into trouble. This time, though, she wasn't just fixing cars. She was fixing something much bigger. The line went quiet as Jake processed what she had just said. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter, but firm. "I'm on it. You just keep moving, Em. I'll get things set up." Emily exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She wasn't alone. She had someone she could trust. And that was the first step toward making sure the secrets she had uncovered didn't stay buried for long. As she began walking again, the sun dipping low behind the trees, Emily felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. This was only the beginning. But she knew one thing for sure. Whatever came next, she was ready. The story was far from over, and she was about to be at the center of it.